leadership skills in our businesses, in our personal life, in our faith walk, and also for those people who may be entrepreneurs to see how we can lead by example. Today we started this journey July 18th, 2022, and we are 2/3 of the way through the Bible. Whoop, whoop. And today we're going to be discussing Habakkuk. And so I'm going to read the introduction and read what the lessons in leadership are and look forward to the discussion, because leadership with no easy answers. God commissioned Habakkuk, a contemporary of Jeremiah and Ezekiel, to lead in troubled times. His name means to embrace. And he earned the title by wrestling with God in the beginning of his book and by developing deep intimacy with God by the book's end. Habakkuk could have titled his book Leadership with No Easy Answers. This prophet struggled with why God allowed the people of Judah to get by with their immoral and sinful ways. He cried out to God and at first got no answer. God seemed far too tolerant for Habakkuk's taste. Finally, God gave him a vision about his plan to rectify the situation by raising up Babylon to plunder and capture Judah in war. At this point, Habakkuk faced a whole new dilemma. Would God really use a nation even more wicked than Judah to correct Judah? This seemed preposterous to him, so he presented God with an integrity check. Do you really know what you're doing here? When God answered his question, he learned to trust and ended the book with a beautiful psalm of faith. Habakkuk teaches us to be praying leaders. The entire book is a dialogue between God and him. The only book in the Bible laid out in this way. As a prophet, Habakkuk had to feed the people and lead the people. But first, intercede for the people. Far too often, those of us who assume leadership positions are doers who forget this key role. In the New Testament, Peter said he would give himself to two priorities: the Word of God and prayer. This is the first job of a spiritual leader. Habakkuk also teaches us that it's okay to ask God questions. We should enjoy such intimacy with God that we can candidly express our questions, concerns, or confusion over God's ways. When we lack answers, we ought to run to God, seeking his wisdom. Habakkuk asked detailed and specific questions. Leaders must feel secure enough to admit they don't know it all and seek insight from God. Finally, the greatest leadership principle we learn from Habakkuk is trust. He knew he wasn't in control any more than we are today. He waited on God. When God finally spoke, Habakkuk had to trust him. He certainly didn't understand. In essence, his closing psalm says, although I don't understand what is happening and nothing is working out the way I would like it, I'll still rejoice and trust God's wisdom. The lessons in leadership for today: leaders must learn to wait on the Lord before they act on his word. Wise leaders acknowledge their limitations and seek wise counsel from God. Godly leaders are not ashamed or afraid to ask detailed questions of the Lord. Good leaders discipline themselves to listen to the voice of God and thereby develop an intimate relationship with him. Mature leaders rejoice in each circumstance, knowing who controls all things. So as we get started here, listening. Leaders earn their right to be heard. So many of you have been in the room here on Clubhouse and in many of the rooms that I lead, and you'll hear me acknowledge people in the listening lounge. And you'll hear me not only acknowledge them, but thank them for the difference they make. Because people listen to the leaders and empower them by the depth and the ability of their leadership, which is super powerful. Habakkuk teaches us that leaders must first be listeners. In the first 4 verses of his book, the prophet cries out for God to answer his questions. He begs God to respond to the injustice, the violence, and the perversion of his nation. He knew God was infinitely just. He could not understand why God didn't seem interested in doing something about Judah's rebellion. When God finally did respond, he gave Habakkuk a distasteful answer. God declared that he planned to use the Babylonians to punish Judah. He intended to use a nation more unjust than Judah to correct injustice among the Jews. That just didn't make sense to Habakkuk. Even so, the prophet continued to listen. He wrestled with God, but knew that leaders earn their right to speak by listening. When they listen, they gain something more precious than the privilege to speak. There are 8 things they gain by listening. Number 1, they gain insight about people. They connect with the speaker. They earn their right to speak. They become relevant. They understand the keys to the speaker's talent and to their heart. They identify. They gain authority and they learn. Remember, when you speak, nothing you say will teach you anything. Only when you listen to God and to others will you gain understanding. Now we go to vision, the blueprint for building a bridge to the future. Leaders and vision go together like fire and heat. You can't separate them without destroying their essence. Through Habakkuk, God furnishes some instruction on vision for all of us. A divine vision has 7 parts to it. It should be written down, should be distributed to people, should be acted on. Is there a select time in the future? Motivates us toward the goal, should not be discarded, and will not fail. So now we have the listening and the vision. So with that, I see we have UC Miracle is hung in there. UC Miracle, would you like to share what you've gotten so far out of Habakkuk and listening and vision?
Yes, thank you, Coach. And how are you, Coach? So, yes, from what you shared with us today, it is very critical and important that leaders recognize the fact that, Scripture did say that we can't do anything without the Lord or without God who had given life, who also knows our capacities and our capabilities. So recognizing the God who has made us is very, very important. Excuse me, Coach, please.
I love it. Thank you.
You're welcome. So I did finish, Coach. I was just perfect.
Go ahead.
So, again, you said something that was very important, Coach. You said leaders and vision go together as fire and heat. That's powerful because, Coach, a leader who does not have a vision is a confused leader. Because if you don't even know what you're doing and you don't have a vision, which gives you focus, how are you going to lead the people aright? So it's very important that we pay attention to these things. And thank you so much, Coach.
That is great. Yes, very true. Leaders with no vision are not connected. They are out. Beautiful, beautiful. And as we said, right, listening, leaders earn their right to be heard. Vision, the blueprint for building a bridge to the future, right? That's what a vision, and think about it in today's terms. A lot of coaches, a lot of people do what I call vision boards. And so with a vision board, what is possible is programming our brain so that when we run into a situation, left or right, our brain our subconscious takes over and leads us. And in that subconscious, so does the Holy Spirit, leads us to the path which will head us and lead us to that with which we have set as a vision and a goal. That's the key. So the next two, waiting. This is the act that most leaders hate, because as a leader, we're always in a hurry. We're always in a hurry. We want to get there. We want to produce results. We want things to happen. Habakkuk teaches us that leaders must learn to cherish the waiting time before they get their answers. In chapter 1, the prophet is positioned to watch and see. In chapter 2, he's positioned to stand and see. In chapter 3, he is positioned to kneel and see. God declares 5 woes to Habakkuk in the 2nd chapter of his book, describing his intense displeasure with his people. Yet, if God is sovereign, reigning over everything, then why doesn't he use his leader to bring about justice immediately? The answer appears to be this. While Habakkuk waited, God did a wonderful work in his heart. Beautiful God leads the world. He first wants to lead his leaders. Habakkuk learned at least 4 lessons about God's leadership in the world. The first is, not everything that happens conforms to God's will and wishes. Excuse me. Said another way, the enemy is always out to mess up our goals and our plans, any chance he gets. Number 2, nothing that happens gets overlooked by God. Number 3, everything that happens will ultimately be addressed with justice. And number 4, nothing that happens should distract us from continuing to respond faithfully. So many times when people pray and don't get the answer to their prayers, they go, see, God's not listening, God doesn't care about me, and that's their ticket to go do something stupid. God's leadership in the world, who can fully grasp God's method of dealing with the world around us? He truly is the ultimate leader who governs the affairs of mankind. Habakkuk shows how God influences the nations to perform his will. Consider his methods of influence. There are 3 of them. He sometimes exerts a restraining influence. Number 2, he sometimes exerts a softening influence. And lastly, he sometimes exerts a directing influence. In exerting a restraining influence, through this, he prevents people from doing what they feel naturally inclined to do, taking us out of our comfort zone. Exerting a softening influence, through this, he causes them to move contrary to natural inclinations. Hmm. And then he sometimes exerts a directing influence. Through this, he causes good to result from the evil that others intend. So you can see he's watching, he's manipulating, he's always there to support us. So with that, you see miracle. What do you hear in waiting? The act that most leaders hate. What do you think about having to wait?
Thank you, Coach. So, when it comes to waiting, it is very important that leaders see, Coach. The way I see it is, God is the ultimate leader, like you just said, and that's a very important and very powerful word. As leaders, we should not have that mindset that we know it all. You see, so Coach, if you remember some leaders in the Bible, including Habakkuk, they kept going back to God to get insight and direction, you see, on the steps they need to take. Recognizing, and I repeat again, that God is the ultimate leader. So we should be able to have patience and seek the face of God first before we implement on anything. And that is very, very important, because when we are led by God, then we cannot make mistake. It's very difficult to have regrets. So I hope it makes sense, Coach, and I yield my mic. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Yeah. And I think the other thing to remember is that God knows the future. So sometimes in responding to our prayer, if he were to respond to our prayer the way we want it, it might take us away from what he wants, which ultimately would give us what we wanted times 10.
That's right.
And so to have patience and to have grace with God is a very powerful opportunity that he presents. And I believe it's his way of teaching us. So the last couple of bubbles, these are really fun, and they both speak to the psalm, the song that Habakkuk creates for his prayer and as a thank you and as a connection to God. And so I'm actually going to read it. It's 19 verses, and then we'll dive into the two bubbles. Habakkuk's prayer, a prayer of Habakkuk the prophet. Lord, I have heard of your fame. I stand in awe of your deeds, Lord. Repeat them in our day. In our time, make them known. In wrath, remember mercy. God came from Teman, the Holy One from Mount Paran. His glory covered the heavens, and his praise filled the earth. His splendor was like the sunrise. Rays flashed from his hand. Where his power was hidden, plague went before him. Pestilence followed his steps. He stood and shook the earth. He looked and made the nations tremble. The ancient mountains crumbled and the age-old hills collapsed, but he marches on forever. I saw the tents of Cushan in distress. I saw the tents of Cushan in distress, the dwellings of Midian in anguish. Were you angry with the rivers, Lord? Was your wrath against the streams? Did you rage against the sea when you rode your horses and your chariots to victory? You uncovered your bow, you called for many arrows, you split the earth with rivers, the mountains saw you and writhed, torrents of water swept up and swept by, the deep roared and lifted its waves on high. sun and moon stood. Woof. Sun and moon stood still in the heavens. At the glint of your flying arrows, at the lightning of your flashing spear, in wrath you strode through the earth, and in anger you threshed the nations. You came out to deliver your people, to save your anointed one. You crushed the leader of the land of wickedness. You stripped him from head to foot. With his own spear you pierced his head when his warriors stormed out to scatter us, gloating as though about to devour the wretched who were in hiding. You trampled the sea with your horses, churning the great waves and waters. I heard, and my heart pounded. My lips quivered at the sound. Decay crept into my bones, and my legs trembled. Yet I will wait patiently for the day of calamity to come on the nation invading us. Though the fig tree does not bud and there are no grapes on the vines, though the olive crop fails and the fields produce no food, though there are no sheep in the pen and no cattle in the stalls, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will be joyful in God, my Savior. The sovereign Lord is my strength. He makes my feet like the feet of a deer. He enables. The sovereign Lord is my strength. He makes my feet like the feet of a deer. He enables me to tread on the heights. For the director of music on my stringed instruments. So 2 things. The difference between leaders and followers is perspective. Once Habakkuk grasps God's leadership of the world, he can lead with confidence and poise. He once felt perplexed. Now he has peace. He once felt confused. Now he has contentment. He once felt fearful. Now he has faith in the future. God has planned. The only thing that changed, his perspective. And now the last bubble is about resources, wisdom, and people. Follow, connect. Once again, once Habakkuk grasps God's leadership of the world, he can lead with confidence and poise. He once felt perplexed. Now he has peace. He once felt confused. Now he has contentment. He once felt fearful. Now he has faith in the future. God has planned. And once again, the only thing that changed was Habakkuk's perspective. See how easy it is to see something, judge and assess it, and have it be completely Resources, wisdom, and people follow commitment. The prophet concludes his book with a ringing declaration of his commitment. He recommits himself to God, to his vision, and to the destiny of his nation. Regardless of what happened, he would trust the process in which God had placed him. This is the kind of attitude that enables leaders to make it. Once we make this kind of commitment, all sorts of resources, wisdom, and people follow. When leaders commit in this way, followers rise to the occasion despite adverse circumstances. Habakkuk teaches us the steps to this kind of commitment. So remember, this kind of attitude that enables leaders to make it. Once we make this kind of commitment, all sorts of resources, wisdom, and people follow. Why? Because God has that in the plan. It is our job to get on board and see the resources that show up that he has planned for us. When leaders commit in this way, followers rise to the occasions despite adverse circumstances. Habakkuk teaches us the steps to this kind of commitment. Number one, request. Go ahead. Go ahead and ask God's wisdom and will be to be done. Relax, rest in his control, trust his power and providence. 3, receive, listen and wait for his instruction, remain open to change, respond, obey whatever he commands. And 5, rejoice, worship him regardless of your present circumstances. So remember, 5 steps to the kind of commitment that 5 steps: request, relax, receive, respond, rejoice. Woo! And it's so interesting because to go from a leader to a follower, from a follower to a leader, the line is so minuscule and has us have it's so easy for us to go from follower to leader. Because when we follow with integrity and we follow with passion and love and all of the attributes, so with that, for me, I'm going to hand it over to UC Miracle. What do you see in the difference between leaders and followers?
Thank you, Coach. So, a good follower, Coach, will eventually make a good leader. And you talked about integrity. Coach, it's very important that we maintain integrity at whatever level we are. Because most of the times we are followers before we become leaders. And applying integrity at all levels is very, very important. And so we have to put that to mind and be cautious of that fact and that quality of integrity at every level we are in, so that when we become a leader, we will make a great leader with integrity. Thank you, Coach.
And you hit the nail on the head with that word, integrity. Honoring our word. Creating an empowering conversation for possibility. So many people who say they have integrity, when you listen and you learn how they move, they're not creating an empowering context around them. They're harsh, they're critical. They don't put themselves into the world of the people they're speaking to with enough degree of authenticity and ability to really understand and see the difference. So thank you so much, UC Miracle. Thank you for joining today. This ends the book of Habakkuk. And I want to say thank you to Sister Carnell. Thank you to Blessings of God. Appreciate you. Thank you to Wesley. Thank you to Norris. Thank you all for being here. Thanks for jumping on stage, UC Miracle, and sharing with me. You made a big difference today, and I want to acknowledge you for that. And I acknowledge you, UC Miracle, for being here and stepping up on the stage and for all of you that are in the audience that have listened and pulled this out of the listening. I appreciate each and every one of you. So we're going to end today, and we will be back